Welcome to a large pot of undercooked noodles. This is brush control number 3. In this video, I'm going to try and explain how brush strokes can affect how much paint is left on the model. This is going to be a difficult one to explain, but I'll do my best to try and explain it. If you have any questions, just make sure to leave them in the comments and we'll go for it from there. The last video, we went over how to use the brush at certain angles to make sure you don't miss a spot, making it easier for you to control where the paint goes and doing those high spots and all the raised edges with a lot more ease and less effort. And in this video, I'm going to try and explain to you how the brush will leave different amounts of paint depending on how and where you move the brush to. So in order for me to explain to you how this works, I'm going to have to use quite a large jump in the value of the color, only because I want you to be able to see what is happening when the paint goes down. I've watered my paints to quite a thin consistency. As you can see, it's not super saturated, and I'm going to remove the excess paint off of the brush. And what we're going to try and create here is the high spots on the areas of the highlights of this armor, specifically on the backpack and on the legs. Starting on the legs, I will show you exactly what the paint does when you place it down. With the paint being this thin, you don't really notice much, but what you can see is that the paint will be deposited where I last left the brush. So as you put the brush down, the paint will be drawn to the point where you leave the brush. So if you want the highlight, for example, on this little ball of his foot, you want to make sure you leave the brush in the area where that highlight's going to be. So you want to start below it and move towards it. And as you can see, the biggest amount of paint will be deposited where you last left the brush. So we can use this to our advantage. So while we're painting these parts, if we remember that where we leave the brush is where that most amount of paint will be left, that will help us to work on it in the future. Knowing this information, we can use that to push the paint around on the model. This will help us to put the paint in the right places with a lot less effort and a lot less questioning as to what the paint's going to end up looking like. So always remember to pull the paint to the point where you want the most amount of saturation to be. And as you can see, I'm pulling the paint towards the area that I want the most amount of saturation. I'm going to repeat this a few times in this video, mainly because a lot of people don't quite understand how that process works. And it's one of the easiest things to help force the direction or the shadow or the shade that you're trying to create. It's the easiest way of forcing that. So as you can see, I'm pushing the paint from where I want it to shade from to where I want it to be the brightest in its value. It's not a precise science, but this is a way of pushing the paint around. As long as you acknowledge and know that the paint will always leave the biggest amount or the largest deposit at the end of the stroke. So if you try to stroke in the opposite direction, the amount that's deposited will be on the other side. So make sure to use that to your advantage. This way you can push the paint around the model with an accurate idea of where the paint's going to end up going to. Knowing how the paint behaves when it comes off your brush is one of the most important tools in your arsenal when it comes to painting. This is one of the reasons why I decided to make a series of videos like this, because all of this is about learning a skill that you can apply to your own painting techniques. You don't have to copy what I'm doing, but if you know when you paint the next time that where you last leave your brush, where you pick it off the model is going to be the most amount of paint. It always works like that. That's just how the brush behaves. And if you use that to your advantage, it'll help you to create some excellent results and make your painting life a hell of a lot easier and more enjoyable for yourself. So as you see me working my way around this model, you'll notice that I'm pulling the paint towards the edges that I want the paint to be the brightest at. And because we've watered down the paint, this gives us an almost layered effect as we're painting. So by doing it this way, we're able to control each step of the process the whole way through, as opposed to leaving it up to chance and just hoping that the brush strokes lay in the correct place. It's not so much up to chance as it is up to the knowledge that it takes to get those brush strokes in the right place. And this isn't even a crazy or difficult technique or anything. All this comes down to is practice, using the brush. If you haven't figured it out yet, then being told that that's how it works will help speed up your learning process, as opposed to figuring it out by yourself and only then starting to learn how to work with it. If someone tells you how it works, you can then use that knowledge, and the next time you paint, take notice of what the paint does and how it comes off your brush. And this is what we call brush control. Knowing how your paint behaves is the most important thing. Knowing how your paint behaves when coming off the brush is even more important. So watering your paints down and thinning them and using them in different ways is just as important as knowing how they come off of the brush. And certain brushes will give you a different effect. Every time you paint, you should take notice of how the paint comes off of your brush and the directions you had moved and used the brush in, because this is an important part of learning brush control. I'm just going to lighten this blue up even more so you can see a little bit more of the effects. This is why it's also important to move the model around, because if you're struggling to push the paint into an area, sometimes you may have to turn it upside down to try push the paint where you need the paint to go to. The most important thing you need to take out of this video is that the paint will be where you last left the brush. So keeping that knowledge, go forth and conquer your models. And as you can see, something that was extremely flat before is now starting to take shape and look like it's got more dimension to it than what it ever had before. Here I'm just using a slight wet blend. It's a super easy trick. I will do a video in the future on how to do that. And so as you can see, with just a little bit of effort and a little bit of knowledge of the direction of the brush and which way to push the brush, I'm able to massage the paint around almost in a way that works and is more aesthetically pleasing. In a future video, I'm going to go over how we use glazes and tints to bring all this together, but for now, I'm going to get back to shaping this model out, and we'll go over that in another video coming soon. Hopefully this video gave you some insight into what brush control is at the core elements of brush control. Brush control is a very important piece of knowledge to have, especially when you're painting things. Knowing how your equipment works will make your painting experience so much easier and a lot more enjoyable. Speaking of enjoyable, if you'd like to enjoy your hobby even more, consider joining the Patreon, where you'll get access to my Discord, where we discuss things that cover all of the hobby. We go through printing, we go through painting, we even have a meme section. So if you'd like to join and be part of the best community of painting and printing peoples that exist, you know what to do. Look for that link in the description. While you're down there, you might as well click like, unless you didn't like the video, and if you didn't, then just click the dislike and f*** off. Because that's all that's left to do at the end of the video. We all know that by now.